Okay, now we're live on YouTube.
All right, great. Welcome back to the October 26, 2021 public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We are resuming this afternoon schedule with item number 6 on our public hearing agenda. This meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. And if you would like to testify on any item this afternoon, please join the Zoom meeting at the estimated time shown on our agenda on the website. And information on how to join the meeting can be found on our website or on the screen before each item. And so with that, I will turn it over to Corey Harala to take us through the afternoon's agenda.
Thank you, Sarah. And we'll start right up with public hearing item number 6. LPC 22-00096. This is an application for an amendment in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 850, Lot 75, 935 Broadway in the Ladies Mile Historic District. This is an Italianate style store building designed by Griffith Thomas and built in 1861 to 62. The application is to modify and legalize storefronts and signage installed in non-compliance with Certificate of Appropriateness 21-04543.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. They now have control of the screen. State your name for the record and you may begin.
Hello, commissioners.
Oh, sorry, Richard. Sorry, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Richard Lowry, LPC staff. I'll give a brief introduction before handing it over to Jackie Pudivalon, who will present the presentation, and the architect Eric Barrasso, Studio Super, and Ruth Gilliland of Warner Brothers are here to answer questions. So 935 Broadway was initially presented at a public hearing on January 21st, 2020, where the commissioners approved work at the storefronts along Broadway, East 22nd Street and 5th Avenue. Amongst other work, the proposal initially showed a 5-bay vitrine at East 22nd Street and a 3-bay vitrine at 5th Avenue. The commissioners approved the proposal but stipulated that the storefront vitrines be reduced in terms of size and number. A certificate of appropriateness was issued in March 15th, 2021, with storefront vitrines at the East 22nd Street and 5th Avenue storefronts, each comprising 3 bays, and with splayed ends at 5th Avenue vitrine and open ends at the East 22nd Street vitrine. However, the applicant installed a storefront vitrine comprising 5 bays at East 22nd Street with partially enclosed ends. Thank you, Commissioners. I'll hand it over to Jackie.
Hello, commissioners and Landmark staff. Thank you for hearing our application today. My name is Jackie Pudivalon. I am the preservation consultant for this application, 935 Broadway, the Harry Potter New York store. I'm here today with Ruth Gilliland of Warner Brothers and Eric Barrasso of Studio Super Architects. We're here to ask you to legalize the installation of these 2 vitrines, as Richard has already described. Oops. So as I won't try to repeat the introduction too much, but I just want to locate this building again for you. 935 Broadway stands at the south side of East 22nd Street between Broadway and 5th Avenue, just south of the iconic Flatiron Building in the Ladies Mile Historic District. It has 3 street facades on 5th Avenue, Broadway, and East 22nd Street. Its north facade spans the entire block from Broadway to 5th Avenue on East 22nd. The work in question is on the East 22nd Street elevation and was done in noncompliance with the Certificate of Appropriateness that was issued in March of this year. These vitrines were approved as part of the application for the C of A, which had been shown to you at public hearing in January 2020. Because of the pandemic, the project was put on hold and the C of A was not actually issued until this past March. 5 vitrines were installed on this East 22nd Street elevation rather than the approved number, which was 3. The 3 center bays, which are highlighted in orange, were approved under the C of A. The 2 vitrines highlighted in yellow were added over the course of construction. As often happens with a build out of this scale, there are members of the design team that are in other parts of the country and even overseas, and some things got lost in translation. Couple this with the disjointed nature of the build out due to the pandemic, which caused construction to be put on hold a couple of times and prevented the team from meeting in person in New York. The challenges posed by the pandemic made it easy for some instructions to fall through the cracks. In this case, members of the design team were under the miscomprehension that these end vitrines would not require additional LPC review. I will elaborate on this further into the presentation. We're seeking to legalize the installation again of these two end vitrines with proposed modifications that will introduce more transparency into these end vitrines. Because we do not think that the vitrines as installed call undue attention to themselves and therefore do not overwhelm this grand facade nor detract from the historic character of the building or the district. Here's the existing partial floor plan showing you the display windows on the East 22nd Street elevation and showing you the fixture that has been built at the interior behind these 5 display windows. You can see there are still 3 unobstructed windows on either side of the vitrines, here and over here, and that the structural piers have very deep reveals which make it difficult to see into these display windows. Here are the 5 vitrines as they look when standing on the sidewalk in front of the building. You'll note the mirror-like quality of the glass makes it difficult to see what's in these windows as you pass by walking on the sidewalk. It's actually very hard to see into these windows unless you're standing within a few inches of the glass. For this reason, we wanted to provide this elevation drawing, which shows the foam core cutouts that comprise the Hogwarts-themed display windows, which pay homage to the school and its 4 houses. You'll also note looking at this elevation that there is a central storefront bay here, which is highlighted by pairs of pilasters on each side, and that a symmetrical pattern of windows flank it. By introducing the 5 vitrines, they have maintained the symmetry on this facade. Here's the nighttime view of these vitrines. There are colored gels on the lights that are intended to provide a soft glow at these windows, and the colors reflect the signature colors of the Hogwarts houses. I'd like to point out, while we look at this slide, that the light coming from the unobstructed windows looks much brighter than the light coming from the vitrines themselves. Over the course of construction, which happened in fits and starts due to the pandemic, changing aspirations for the interior build out led the design team to decide to install 5 vitrines to best accommodate the wand selection area within the store. This store recreates themes and places from the Harry Potter books and movies, such as the 4 houses of Hogwarts, a confectionery, a butterbeer bar, and more importantly, a place to sample and pick out wands. The intention is to give the visitor a rich, immersive experience that celebrates Harry Potter and the wizarding world. So here is that wand area I just described, and this is the location of the 5 vitrines. Here is what the interior of the store looks like behind those 5 vitrines. Visitors are encouraged to sample wands on the shelves and to try them out on an interactive wand feature that is that circular display in this photo. These fixtures also provide storage space for the wand's inventory, because the space in the building taken up by the Harry Potter New York store has very few storage areas. Here's the side of that westernmost vitrine, and through the archway is that central wand experience area. You can see it in here. Unfortunately, the design team did not realize that the introduction of 2 additional vitrines would require approval by LPC again, because A, the setback of the vitrine's walls far exceed 18 inches, which you can see in this lower photo, where a tape measure was placed on the floor. And secondly, because the walls of this fixture do not attach to the pier walls, they're not physically attached here, and do not actually touch the ceiling, as you can see up here. Here's the proposed remediation, which is to open the vitrine on the sides, as shown in the photo montage here on the right. So again, to cut away wall and open it up on the side so you can see through. Here's the side of the east vitrine, and again, through the archway is that central wand experience area. Again, the setback of the vitrine's wall far exceeds 18 inches. It's at 43 inches on this side, which you can see in this lower photo. And again, the walls of this fixture do not attach to the piers or the ceiling currently, which you can see up here. And here again is the proposed remedy to open the vitrine on the side, as shown in this photo montage on the right. And now just to provide some background for historic context, and the photo on the left is the earliest photo that I could find for this building. This is from 1899, which to my eyes, I think shows that there were display cases that were placed right against the storefront glass with chandeliers hanging above them. The photo on the right shows what I think to be an entrance at that center bay. This looks like a pair of double-leaf doors to me, which would explain why that bay is a focal point on this facade, with 5 storefront bays flanking it on either side. And just for some more recent history on the building, here's the designation photo from 1989 and a photo of what the building looked like under the previous tenant, which was Restoration Hardware. And as you consider this application, we ask you to keep in mind the existing conditions of other retail spaces within the district, which have also incorporated vitrines into their incorporated vitrines behind their display windows. For instance, Home Depot on West 23rd Street. Basically, all of their display windows on 23rd are blocked by these vitrines that they've built, these display shelves, I should say, and wood walls that they've built behind the glass, which you can see in these lower photos. This is the Club Monaco store, which you can see has blocked 2 of the vitrines on the Fifth Avenue side and also a few on the street side. Here's Blue Mercury at 965 6th Avenue, which has built these display cases right up against the glass. The Vitamin Shop at 655 6th Avenue, which you can see in this photo. This is the street side elevation. You can see in this photo the vitrines that are built right behind these glass displays, which completely block these windows. Paragon Sports at 867 Broadway, which also has vitrines in its windows, as well as other opaque coverings on display windows. Likewise, the Container Store at 629 6th Avenue, which has vitrines on both the street and, avenue and street elevations. And my personal favorite, because it has Marshalls and TJ Maxx, the building at 620 6th Avenue, which has a really proliferation of different types of coverings on the windows. I think these are all vinyls applied to the outside, as well as vitrines on the inside of the displays. This is 126 Fifth Avenue. I'll kind of go through this a little more quickly now. I think you're getting the point we're trying to make, which is that there are a lot of other large stores in this district that have significant amounts of transparency obscured by vitrines. Here is the T-Mobile store, which is right at the Flatiron building, right by our subject building. Italy at 200 Fifth Avenue, which has some vinyls in its windows. And back to our building. And with that, I just want to conclude by saying that because this building has a full block continuous storefront, we believe it has a scale that is not overwhelmed by the introduction of the 2 additional vitrines. Further, the highly reflective mirror-like quality of the glass and the depth of the reveal at these storefront piers and the depth of the vitrines themselves make it difficult to perceive these vitrines. And so we do not believe that they detract from the building or the character of this district. And I thank you for listening to this presentation, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Right, commissioners, do we have any questions? We've got a few. Okay, Commissioner Chapin, followed by Commissioner Devonshire.
Checking, I'm unmuted, yeah. I was just wondering when the decision was made to do the 4 houses in the vitrines, because it doesn't seem that it could have been made earlier, because you wouldn't have just featured 2 houses and had the middle, Hogwarts vitrine originally. It doesn't make much sense. So I was just wondering if that was a late decision or what was planned for the 3 original vitrines in terms of content. Do you know?
Okay, well, I was not involved in the project at that stage, so I'm going to have to ask the architect or
Yeah.
the project manager from Warner Brothers to address this.
I can speak with this. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
this is Eric
The-
Barassa.
Yes, I was the architect of record on the project and the firm doing the Alt 2 renovation of the interior. At the time, it was always planned as wands behind. So the wands is the highest grossing category. If I should divulge that, it's very important, I should say, to the brand and the leasing opportunity here. So it was strategically important to have wands as a focus on the interior. On the exterior, I think it was very much post-rationalized. The hope was to have 4 flags in the building. That was reduced to just 2. So it became not a strategy about the houses, and that was something developed sort of late in the project. The fixturing, I can tell you, part of what Jackie alluded to was all done by an outfitter in the UK who built everything abroad and came to install it here. And I think that's where a lot of was lost in translation and what they're getting, in that they were only getting 3 bays of wall architecture. Yet they showed up with their fixturing, which is what exceeded and created the excess vitrines. So I think the merchandising team sort of came and in the last 2 months created the composition that you now see in the window. It wasn't premeditated along with the real heart of the project, which is the revenue driving interior space. And that was driven by the wands behind it. So I'm not really answering your question, but I can say it was sort of done by a merchandising team after the fixtures were put in place by the UK vendor, with these additional vitrines creating 5 instead of 3 beyond the physical architectural stud walls that are behind.
Yeah, I think you are answering my question pretty well. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Devonshire.
Now, I'm curious to know, of all the other buildings cited, were they given violations for having created too many vitrines beyond what they agreed to?
Well, I'll just take a quick stab at that. And we've looked at some of these. There were many examples there, of course. We believe quite a few were done without permits. And kind of as a body of installations, there are some that are, that have kind of legacy, that have been there since designation in certain areas, certain stores. Often these change so quickly that they come in and out before anyone knows it, or it could take enforcement action on it. And then there are occasionally some that you all have actually approved with a certain number. So I think we don't actually know out of all of those examples which ones are illegal at this time and which ones are not, but they are ones that we now have our attention on and can take a closer look at. But just to point out that they may be examples of ones that can be seen today, but that doesn't mean that the commission has approved them, of course.
Thank you.
Yes, but I think that there are some in those examples that were approved by the commission, some that I can remember, but it may not be all of them, certainly. Okay, other questions?
Could I just add that this is Ruth, and I, even before Eric came on the project, I was the project manager, and as Jackie said, it was a team that was spread across the globe. We had our design team in London. We had to work very closely with the author and her agents. So our initial plan for the store, it had to be reworked because of some of the pipes in the basement. We couldn't put some of the functions we needed to put in the store in the basement. And so the whole first floor basement got reworked. And I think during that time, that's when wands got moved around. It was a very chaotic process. And it was aggravated by the start-stop of the pandemic, and also just by not being able to sit around the table with all the different designers to point at plans. You know, it's just a lot harder when you're working on a Zoom call around across time zones. So just, it wasn't just all commercial decisions. It was somewhat chaotic as well, just the whole design process.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, other questions? Okay, why don't we move to, yes, Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead. Just accept the request to unmute.
Okay, help me with the time frame. You got approval for LPC. You started construction, and at what point did LPC find out that you were doing work without a permit? When did that happen?
Well, I can tell you a few things, and then I should ask the architect to address the rest of your question. The presentation was made to you commissioners in January 2020, and then because of the pandemic, the whole project was put on hold. It was a question of would it even happen at all? And then eventually, when the decision was made to move forward, they got their permit finally issued in March of 2021. And for the rest of your question, I should ask the architect or project manager to answer.
Sure. I think the realization was made when the fixture vendor showed up and started their install with everything made in the UK, realizing that they've extended the scope of the Wands area beyond to create an additional 2 vitrines. The flanking walls are an additional 5 feet, which creates the additional vitrines from the outside. I think they were under the impression that their fixture package had a little more creative freedom as long as they respected the architectural walls that were built, and if they stayed far away from the glass, which they are, but we understand that creates the additional vitrines.
Right, so normally we regulate things that are within 18 inches of the glass, but except in the case of sort of more physical walls, which this sort of crossed that line from sort of fixture to something more in the realm of what we would designate. But we understand that, you know, the assumption was that it was a fixture and set so far back from the glass that it was not something that needed to come back to us.
I can attest that there is no architectural infrastructure in this display fixturing that I'm certain of, because we did see the turned over space and, you know, attested that it was matching the plans.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? All right, we'll move to public testimony and we can come back. We may have more questions after that. So I'm going to turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony. And if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, whether you signed up or not, please raise your virtual hand so that we can identify you.
Okay, so I do not have any advanced signups for this item, so I'm looking to see if there's any hands raised. Okay, no public testimony.
Okay, no testimony on this one. We do have a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 5 recommending denial of the 2 vitrines unless Warner Brothers proposes illumination, color, and brightness of the vitrines that is contextual, harmonious, and appropriate for the Ladies Mile Historic District. So their concern seems to be not the physical fixture itself, but what is displayed. I don't know if you want to address that or speak to the discussion with the community board.
Yes, please, Chair Carroll.
Yes.
I was called you Chair Sarah. Yeah, I do just want to mention that initially when we presented this exact presentation to the community board, that nighttime image of the building was not included in the presentation. So they made their determination on the lighting without actually seeing a photo of the building at night. And only one person on their landmarks committee said she had even walked past the building at night. So, that was unfortunate for us that they decided to make that judgment without actually being presented with, the material that would inform them. So that is why we included that photo in this presentation.
Okay.
But I also want to say that before they came to that decision, when they had gone through their comments of each committee member, each of the 5 committee members said they supported the additional vitrines as is, but then it was the chair of the committee that said, I think we should have the resolution say we're going to deny this unless they address the lighting, which again, they had not been presented with.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, commissioners, any final questions? Okay, there's a few of you that are still muted. I'm requesting to unmute you and we'll begin our discussion. So Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close the hearing.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And, the commission had originally approved 3 vitrines. And as we've heard through the construction process, the fixture was enlarged and 2 more vitrines have been created. The applicants are proposing to mitigate that by opening the sides of the fixtures so that one can see from an oblique view, can see past the display into the store. So that's something to consider. And as we've discussed, historically, commercial spaces some had vitrines and some had other kinds of display and some were very transparent. We as a commission have always wanted to see transparent windows into commercial spaces to have that sort of active vitality of the commercial space expressed, but we have approved vitrines as they are typical historic commercial features as well, and it's usually a balance of how many on a facade. And in this case, the vitrines are set back almost 4 feet, 4 feet on one side and almost 4 feet on the other side, and we'll have open sides. And the photos will sort of show how you will perceive them from the street here. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Devonshire, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, I'm typically not inclined to reward applicants for flaunting or ignoring agreements that they've made with the Landmarks Commission. Everyone on the design team, I assume, spoke English, so it wasn't a language issue. However, because of the mitigation efforts they've made, I'm inclined to approve this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen? I think he left us. Commissioner, he left. Yeah. Commissioner Bland?
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable with the idea that we might have approved this initially, and I think particularly with the mitigation that they've offered, that it's an acceptable, appropriate solution.
Okay. Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I think that the fact that they're removing the ends, which will, give the more of an appearance of openness, is helpful. I would like to say that I would prefer if the lighting were different, but I don't know that that's before us.
Right. It's difficult to regulate the wattage or the type of light.
Yeah.
All right, Commissioner Jefferson?
I can approve this. I don't know what the opening of the ends mean. I don't know, you're just looking down a corridor. I can approve this.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I have a quick question. I think it could be for you, Sarah, it could be for Corey. When we originally saw it, was it proposed with the 5 and we knocked it down to 3? Or was it proposed with the 3 and that's what we approved?
Corey, I'll let you answer that.
I believe we saw some scheme. I don't know if the commission, if you all saw a scheme with more. I think it's something they were interested in the past, but maybe by the time you saw it, it had been reduced. But I do not know the answer to that. I could try to find out quickly though.
Yeah, but I think when we did see it, it was, there were, we saw a larger scope of signage as well through the process, reduce that. So everything got, I think, a little bit reduced through the process.
I asked the question because I can't, because the standard, our standard is, would we have approved this if we'd seen it in the first place? And if we had seen 5 and rejected it, I'm not sure I understand why I'm going to sit here and say, well, we rejected it and now I'm seeing the same thing. But yeah, if I saw it the first time, I would have approved it if I saw it the first time and I rejected it.
Well, I think one thing is if we did see it that way, we would have been looking at it in the context of a proposal with a lot more signage as well and flagpoles. And so I think in that context, if, I could see us feeling like maybe all of it together was too much and made suggestions for things to be reduced. And I think it is okay to look at it a second time in a different context and come to a different conclusion. So I think that is the, sometimes we have a second presentation on something, and in that context of that second presentation, the commission has made a different determination, for example, on projects that have recently expired. And we look at it again.
Corey, did we buy you enough time?
You did. It was proposed with 5. However, as Sarah mentioned, there were numerous other signage elements, and I do not believe that all commissioners at the time were opposed to the 5. It was kind of part of the mix that was discussed.
Okay. I without seeing the two contexts together, I'm not sure that I feel I have enough information to approve it. So.
Okay. Okay. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Looking at the night photo, we used the 4 different vitrines. It doesn't overwhelm to me, so I'm not sure exactly what we saw in the first presentation. I don't remember how I voted, but I think given the mitigation of removing the ends of the vitrines, that I'm okay with it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I think I might have accepted this with the 5 vitrines originally, but I think the mitigation and the fact that these are clearly very removable elements which are set far back from the window, I think I can approve it as it's presented today.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum. Oh, Commissioner Goldblum.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I could say I was cursed there for a minute, but I won't. And I could say that if I could wave a wand, I'd make it only 3, but I think it is appropriate as is. So I can approve it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, and I think I think it's a really good question to think about what we did the first time, but I think for me, I think it was in a different package. This is a different presentation, and they are proposing the mitigation this time. And I don't know that they were as temporary in their installation as initially proposed. So I'm okay with it. So I think we have enough to support this. Commissioner Devonshire, would you make the motion?
Reluctantly. In regards to 935 Broadway in the Ladies Mile Historic District, LPC 22000096, an application to modify and legalize storefronts and signage installed in non-compliance with the Certificate of Appropriateness 2104543. I recommend approval, finding that the work did not damage or destroy any significant architectural features of the building. The creation of the storefront display vitrines within the display windows on East 22nd Street is consistent with the commercial nature of the ground floor, and interior wall will be set back over 4 feet from the glazing, thereby maintaining a level of depth and transparency into the storefront. That the partitions at the ends of the storefront vitrine along 22nd Street will be removed to enhance the transparency into the store from the sides and of those display windows. and the large scale of this commercial building and its numerous storefront bays can support the 2 additional storefront display vitrines on East 22nd Street without detracting from the building and the Ladies Mile Historic District.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Nay.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
So that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to
Thank
the
you,
next.
Commissioners.
Thank you. Move to the next and final item.
Okay, and that is item number 7, LPC 22-02908, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1506, lot 3, 1133 Fifth Avenue in the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District. This is a neo-federal style apartment building designed by Emery Roth and built in 1927 to 1928. The application is to modify an existing rooftop addition, install pergolas, replace railings, modify masonry openings, and replace windows.
Okay, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Just click on your screen and you can advance the slides using your arrow keys. State your name for the record and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Erin Ruley of Higgins, Quays, Barth & Partners. We are the preservation consultants for this project. I'm joined today by Stephen Harris and Alejandro de Mesa of Stephen Harris Architects. And I'm going to walk you through a bit of the history and context for the proposal, and then Stephen and Alex can take you through the specifics of the design. Alex, can we go to the next slide? So as Corey said, we're here today to talk about 1133 Fifth Avenue. It's located between 94th and 95th Streets in the expanded Carnegie Hill District. And this application is for the penthouse, which is a triplex unit, and we'll see that in a bit more detail on the next slide here. So the triplex unit is the 14th floor, which is that uppermost floor of the main section of the building, the setback penthouse above that, and then the base of the water tower enclosure there. So the scope of work includes removal of that greenhouse on Fifth Avenue and modifying those openings on the setback penthouse level and replacing the railings along Fifth Avenue. And then at the secondary elevation, so it has a primary facade on Fifth Avenue and an exposed south and east elevation, which we can see in the photo on the right, that where there are expanded masonry openings and that existing greenhouse, you see it at the setback story, the curved greenhouse to be replaced, and then new pergolas and railings and modified openings in that existing context back there. And so the appropriateness for the proposal is rooted in a few basic ideas. First, that there's been a significant history of change here at the building, at the penthouse, and at the broader Fifth Avenue context. And all of these proposed changes today are to areas that have been modified over time or to entirely non-historic fabric that are recent additions. Secondly, that the triplex apartment was an original configuration to the building. It's a somewhat unique situation and has always been treated in a manner distinct from the lower floors. And finally, that unique condition, that combination of the triplex unit and the history of change presents an opportunity for a carefully crafted, visible modern intervention. The two layers coexist. And as you'll see, it is one that improves the overall composition and that has been significantly diminished over time. Next slide. And so here we see an early view of the building just after construction, 1928. And as Corey mentioned, it was designed by Emery Roth, a 14-story plus penthouse building. And it was originally configured as with 13 units as a rental building. It was converted to co-op in the 1940s, but each of the floors was essentially a single unit with the exception of the penthouse. The penthouse was 14, 15, and that base of the water tower. And this is a somewhat unique condition and very typically Emery Roth. So Roth was keenly aware of what developers and tenants desired in their living spaces. And he's one of the first to introduce the designed water tower enclosure. But he originated the idea of creating occupiable space within the water tower. This was a way of enticing developers to spend more on the design of these enclosures that they viewed as utilitarian structures, but created really unique living spaces. They were derisively known as Roth Towers. It became a sort of signature of his. And then on the right, we see an early map of the building, which shows you what the original plan of the penthouse looked like. And so you can see at the center, there you go. We're following the plan of that penthouse level and then the water tower above there. And as we go through the existing conditions, you'll see how much that has evolved over time. Next slide. The 1940s tax photos. And so here we start to see two of the primary issues. One, the original massing of the crown of the building, 14, the setback story at 15 and the water tower. And then also the distinction between the 14th story at that secondary elevation, the exposed secondary elevation, and how the fenestration varied from what was happening below. And if we could go to the next slide, you see a slightly broader view, another tax photo, but again, you start to see how that the fenestration pattern was really responsive to the plan of the triplex, which varied from those very standard single unit floors on the lower levels. You also see that sort of stepped massing of the original penthouse. Now today, beyond that, on that 15th floor is where that curved greenhouse exists. And there's also an addition above that as well. Next slide. By the 1980s, there's been significant change. So this is all prior to designation. As is typical of Fifth Avenue, you see many of those triple ganged windows on Fifth Avenue have been merged to create one large masonry opening. But then above the cornice line, you can also see a greenhouse that's tight up against the parapet, a projecting bay window to the right of that. And then along that secondary elevation, we see the expanded openings that were created sometime in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And that extends all the way to the back of the building. Next slide. And that brings us to the existing condition today. So what we saw in the 1980s tax photo was an earlier generation of additions and interventions. The 1990s alterations really replaced everything that existed in the 1980s that had been created there and added on to them. So we have that existing greenhouse on Fifth Avenue, which the removal of which will reinstate the historic massing of the very clear cornice line with the setback penthouse above, and also free up that urn on the corner. And then and the modified openings were there at least by the 1980s. It's possible that they were modified prior to that. And the existing projecting bay window dates to the 1990s as well. On the rear elevation, you can see rear and side elevations, you see all of those modified openings. Everything's aluminum infill, 1990s railings, that curved greenhouse. And then the mass above the curved greenhouse is at the 16th level, 16th floor. That was a 1990s addition. And then there was also another addition on a north terrace. So the mass, it's not just changes to the masonry openings and the addition of greenhouses. There's fundamental changes to the massing and that sort of multi-layered or multi-leveled reading of the penthouse levels. Next slide. And we'll just go through this rather quickly, that some of the details of the existing conditions. On the left is the historic corner pier with the urn and the 1990s railing. So very simple picket with an applied medallion on it. Next slide. The existing greenhouse, modified openings along Fifth Avenue, and the just overall general conditions of what's happening at that terrace level on Fifth Avenue. Next slide. And then this is a view on the left looking down from the 16th floor. So at the top left, we see that addition that was added in the 1990s. And then looking down on the terrace, the curved greenhouse flanked by, it's flanked on either side by masonry extensions. And then the existing terrace condition, how it wraps that volume. And then on the right is the east terrace, so on the rear of the building with the existing pergola and that return of the greenhouse where it meets the existing masonry corner. Next slide. And then now we'll just step back a bit and look at the Fifth Avenue context. This is a 1931 view of this stretch of Fifth Avenue from across the reservoir. And so we see here the Fifth Avenue and Carnegie Hill is really characterized by this early layer of 1920s apartment buildings. So they're blocky massing and their roof lines, and most of which are topped by or surmounted with penthouses above, and 1133 is identified by the red arrow there. And if we could go to the next slide. Penthouses really evolved as part of those 1920s developments. Prior to that, rooftop units were primarily for maids' quarters, service areas, and but in the 1920s, we see architects and developers recognizing the value of these spaces. And here we see 3 pieces of contemporary press. I love the one on the left only because it says you can count that there are a dozen available penthouses in the city, which I think the idea that you could count penthouses in the city is unfathomable. And we get to see just sort of how these spaces existed historically. So rooftop terraces with pergolas, plantings, awnings, furniture, these were extensions of the living space and very much an original intent of the designs. And I think, as you'll see in the design proposal, this really engages in that history of placemaking. Next slide. And so we've seen how it existed historically, and now this is what we see today, the existing conditions. The evolution of these rooftops through additions and changes to masonry openings. There's great diversity and varied character. I think of particular note at the center top row is 1125 Fifth Avenue. That is another one of the Emery Roth water tower apartments. That is immediate, it's on the south corner of 94th Street. So our building and this building really bookend 94th Street. It's had extensive modifications to the penthouse level, the modified openings. And then at the bottom left, 1136 Fifth Avenue, which is our neighbor immediately to the north, right? Where openings there were modified with commission approval in 2016. And then if we look at that view on the bottom right, it's really just gives you an overall sense of the broader context along Fifth Avenue and how that has evolved over time. And I think with that in mind, I'm going to pass the presentation to Stephen to introduce the design.
I think I'll let Alejandro walk you through it and I'll answer questions for you. There may be some specific things that I can add more information to, but I think that in general, it's quite straightforward what we're trying to do. Alex, unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Alejandro de Mesa from Stephen Harris Architects. I'll walk you through the elevations first, and then we can look at some sightline studies and some mock-ups that we did. You can see on the left is the existing condition where the top floor of the main volume of the building is the lowest floor of the apartment, as Aaron pointed out. The middle floor here is the setback, which steps back about 14 feet from the main facade. And then you have that the projecting bay window on the top floor. You then have on the right the proposal on the 14th floor of the building. No change is being proposed to the existing windows on that floor. As you come up to the 15th level, we're proposing to replace the railings with black and bronze railings that are sort of inspired by the original Emery Roth railings, which we can show you in the appendix. You see that by removing the greenhouse on the north side, as Aaron pointed out, you sort of free up that urn that's in the corner. And then beyond on the setback facade, we have 3 expanded openings where 3 separate openings with masonry pier between them that's about 18 inches wide, which carries the lines of the outer pilasters of the tower above. So on the south and the north here. The middle window is set back approximately 12 inches from the face of the masonry, with the flanking windows set back slightly less than that. No change is being proposed to the projecting bay window on the top floor, but as Aaron noted, we're proposing to replace the railings on all of the terraces to match that Emery Roth inspired design. Moving to the south, we're proposing a replacement of the windows on the 14th floor of the apartment east of this chimney volume with new bronze windows that are within the existing openings. So no expansion is being proposed to the openings on that floor. This is the southern greenhouse Aaron was talking about with the existing masonry volume to the west of it. And you can see the south side of that greenhouse that's facing the park here. This is the 1990s addition that Aaron mentioned. And of course, the volume of the water tower to its west. In our proposal on the 15th floor, again, we're proposing to replace the railings. But what we're proposing to do here is remove that existing curved greenhouse and merge the existing masonry that's to its west, and then again to north, which I'll show you on the next slide, to create a uniform masonry volume that turns the corner as it heads north there. We're proposing to remove the existing pergola that's on the east terrace and replace it with a new pergola further north. And then we're also proposing a new pergola on the 16th floor on the east side of the apartment. You can see also on that 1990s addition that we're proposing to combine the window openings to create a more of a sort of ribbon window effect on that added volume. Next slide. This is the east elevation. You get that east side of the curved greenhouse. Here we're proposing again to turn that into a masonry volume that connects this pier, this masonry volume, with the one that's on the south, and turn the corner with again bronze multi-light windows that face east. You can see the proposed pergola here on this floor and the proposed pergola on the 16th floor. Again, full railing replacement on both floors here.
We're also eliminating one window there. Alex.
Correct. Beyond here, we're eliminating an existing window opening. Again, we're proposing replacement of these existing aluminum windows with bronze windows within the existing masonry openings. Excuse me. This is just a close-up showing a detailed view of the proposed new window openings. This dashed line indicates the area of the pergola, of the greenhouse that had existed or that exists currently. Just showing dimensions here on the openings. Here you can get a better view of that pilaster continuing down between the proposed window openings. And that happens on both sides. Close-up of the south view again. Close-up of the east view. And then I'm going to skip through the plans here for 1 second. These axons give you a better sense of what we believe is how the windows are most experienced, which is on the diagonal. And as you'll see in the photographs that we'll show on the next slides, one experiences all of these openings really not head on because there's no visibility from Fifth Avenue, and any of the visibility is found really from within the park on the diagonal. So here you get the axon showing the removal of this greenhouse, the expanded window openings, and you can see here how that southern greenhouse is then merged together with the east masonry volume to create a more continuous parapet across the south side of the building. This is just looking the other way. You get the two pergolas. Again, the joining of that masonry volume with this masonry volume to create that continuous parapet. We saw this view. These are photographs of the mock-up that we created. You can see here beyond the orange 2x4s that are indicating the extent of the visibility of those proposed window openings. Of course, with the greenhouse gone, you would see the top of that window opening as well. Again here, the mock-up of those window openings as viewed from within the park. This is the proposed scheme showing the 3 new window openings with the removal of the greenhouse on the north, and also the proposed new handrails. This is a view from the west side of the reservoir showing the existing condition, and this showing the proposed. These are more photographs of the mock-up. This is from 94th Street on the other side of that single family house that's just south of the building. The red line indicates the extent of the parapet that would run across there. This is further east on 94th Street, looking straight up. Even further east on 94th Street. And then this is the proposal showing the continuity of that parapet. This is the view from Madison Avenue on the east. These are the mock-up posts which delineate the extent of the pergolas and the corner of the new volume. This is the proposed. You get the 2 pergolas and you get that corner, that previously rounded corner becomes a square corner, and that window is removed from the east. This is from 95th and Madison, where you get a sliver of that, that south side of the greenhouse there. And that's it. Aaron, should we go through the appendix?
You might show the handrail.
Yeah, this is a detail of a handrail. We found a snippet of what we think was the Emery Roth railing on this building, the originally designed Emery Roth railing. And so the proposed railing on the top shows a sort of a slightly simplified version of that, but still inspired by those intersecting curved shapes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for a nice, thorough presentation. We do have some questions. Commissioner Goldblum, go ahead.
Hi. Why did you choose, and why is it appropriate to have the gridded glass on the addition facing south and east, where you don't have it anywhere else, nor does it seem to appear elsewhere in the building?
I think perhaps I can take it from the appropriateness perspective, and then maybe Alejandro can talk to the specific design intent. But I think if we could go to the view, Alex, of the from Madison to show that that variation in the plan in the detail of the openings is really only visible when you are in elevation or in a highly zoomed in view, because the actual perspective is from this view is skewed by the railing. And then as you step back to Madison Avenue, you don't really appreciate that distinction. And I think that there are quirks in plans always in design that reflect the use of the interior space, and that that's inherent in this design too. I think if we looked at the original configuration of the setback penthouse, the windows were not aligned in on that elevation, and that was driven by the plan of the interior, and it didn't align with the water tower above. So I think there are these inherent sort of oddities that reflect plan configurations, and that also, again, these are various setback levels, and none of it would be sort of appreciated as a contrast to how the other openings are treated in actuality.
Another way of answering the question, Commissioner, is it was a specific request from the owner. And it has to do with the use of that room internally. And I think that we felt that if you look down 2 floors to where the windows that are double hung are on the, I guess it's called the 12th floor. Those are double divided. In other words, the proportions of those daylight openings are very similar to the ones that we're proposing on the gridded piece there. It is not a small grid, and they are relatively generous, and that we thought that might be a way of accommodating both the owner's desires and a reference to other fenestration in the building.
Okay,
I know
thanks.
those are double hung, but you know, they're the daylight openings and the proportions of those pieces are very similar to what we're proposing on the top.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? All right, I don't see any other questions just now, so we'll turn to public testimony, and we may have more questions after that. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I'll turn it over to Sasha to take us through the testimony.
Okay, so I have one sign up in advance from the Friends of the Upper East Side, Lara Variel. I'm going to promote you to panelist. Lara, you should be in the meeting. You can go ahead and unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. You can turn on your camera if you wish to.
Hi, this is Laura Variali representing Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts, Chair Carroll and Honorable Commissioners. The Hungarian Jewish immigrant Emery Roth is responsible for many of the hotels and apartment buildings that defined the 1920s and 1930s in New York City. 1133 Fifth Avenue is a classic example of Roth's design with a characteristic, highly designed water tower. Friends appreciate the detailed presentation of this proposal and would like to commend the architect and consultants. The removal of the greenhouse at the Fifth Avenue facade is a very welcome change, one that will allow for a better appreciation of the building as a whole and of the water tower. Despite its very low visibility, Friends Preservation Committee is slightly concerned about the extensive glazing on the west portion of the rooftop addition on Fifth Avenue and would ask the applicant to consider a more balanced ratio between masonry and glazing. We believe the proposal to replace the rear greenhouse with masonry to be very significant, and while it reads more densely and obtrusively than the existing addition, it relates better with the staccato step-back pattern of the upper stories commonly present on 1920s apartment buildings. Finally, Friends laments the fact that the fenestration of this fine Roth design is now a hodgepodge of styles and sizes, something that can be remediated by the establishment of a window master plan. Thank you.
You. Okay, I am looking over into the attendees. I do not see any more hands raised. So that concludes the sign up for the speakers.
Okay, thank you. And we did receive the community board resolution from Manhattan Community Board 8 recommending approval of the application as is. Okay.
Can I make one point, Sarah?
Yes, please go ahead, Stephen.
One of the liabilities of elevation drawings is that they only show one face of a pier. And if you've ever designed a chair, you know what an elevation of a leg looks like relative to the leg after you've built it. In fact, those piers are 18 inches wide. They relate to the pilasters above. But more importantly, by being set back a foot, when you look at them on the oblique, which is how you will experience them, There are more than 22 inches in mass. So you cannot see these piers effectively at elevation. You only see them on the oblique from the south on Fifth Avenue. And in fact, they will actually appear much wider than they do in elevation. So we've looked carefully at the precise dimensions of those pieces. Thank you.
I think if I could add something to that, Sarah, the idea of the glazing, reduction of the glazing area, the current greenhouse has a much higher proportion of glazed area than what's currently being proposed, and it's in a forward plane. So that experience is going to be dramatically different than what's being proposed today. And I think just to touch on the Friends' recommendation for a master plan, I think is a slightly separate issue, but I do want to just touch on the appropriateness of replacing the existing modified openings on those secondary elevations at the 14th floor with new bronze windows there, and with which vary from what's happening below. And I think, again, it's just that fundamental validity of the approach of having a visible modern layer here that's of a quality that rises to the level, I think, of the original Roth design, both in its materiality and its detail. But these are highly modified openings that don't represent a historic window pattern. And that 14th floor was always distinct. And these are secondary elevations. And I think that if something were to be approved here in these modified openings, there's no broad application because there is a unique condition here. This is a historic triplex unit. It maintains that configuration. And these are highly modified openings that have existed for a long time. And we're sort of working within that context of change.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I'm going to start to unmute all of you so we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. All right. Okay, Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And this is actually a good slide to leave it on. It sort of shows most of the components of the application. We have the replacement of the secondary facade windows at the 14th floor before us, which as Aaron described, are modified openings that don't relate to the openings on the rest of the building, rest of the facade below. We have the removal of greenhouses, the simplifying of the addition, the mass of the addition by extending in masonry, and new fenestration patterns on those facades, and pergolas as well. So 1, 2, 3, like 4 or 5 components here. So let's, as we discuss it, try to cover each aspect of this. And Commissioner Chapin, would you start this one?
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So I think in general that this is a well thought out proposal and it improves the look of the penthouse. Certainly the removal of the greenhouses and repositioning I think the fenestration on the front, in effect, the larger windows are fine. I had some question about the size of those piers and whether they should be larger. So I was interested in what Stephen Harris had to say about it. I'd be interested in hearing what other members of the commission, architects, think with regard to that, if they need to be a little more hardy or not. But that's a minor aspect, I think. And I think that the fenestration on the 14th floor is replacement of that is fine. What am I missing? There's one other thing, right?
The pergola and the fenestration on the back, the fenestration on the back addition.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with both of those. I think both of those are appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Thank you. Once again, it's a elegant, well put together, sophisticated presentation. Nothing we wouldn't expect. I think that the removal of the greenhouses is totally appropriate, and I'm grateful for it. The pergolas are appropriate. They add to the general cacophony of the roofscape from the back. More in the retention of that ridiculous box on the front of the Roth Tower, but so it goes. And I think it was a fascinating bit of history. The notion that Roth uses a sales opportunity to justify additional architectural expense, I think is a lesson that any of us who are in the trenches probably has learned or would find a blessing to know. I think that for me, the view of the large windows facing west is most significant in the park. And from that view, I think it's hard to argue that the fenestration kind of lets the Roth Tower float on glass. And you saw it in one of the other examples that you showed, where a building nearby had done a similar thing, where there's a strip of glass underneath a solid water tower, a decorative water tower. And it similarly looks harsh, I think. So I would request that that both pilasters and the space in between be carried down into to the 15th floor, I guess it is, or whatever that level is, and additional masonry there kind of carry the design of the general design of the tower down. I think that the windows at the back, the gridded windows, while I hear their suggestions as to why they're appropriate, I really don't buy it. The windows certainly characterized in this triplex are characterized by their breadth and their simplicity and their kind of, if Erin was making the case that the penthouse was always readable, that readability, in my view, translates into large expanses of glass. And I think that everything else that has been done by this project, except for that grid of glass, emphasizes that continuity and that identity. So I would request that they re-examine that with staff. But generally, I think it's an appropriate scheme. The railings are beautiful. It'll be an enhancement to the district.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just note for the record, Commissioner Devonshire is recused on this item and has not been present for this presentation. Commissioner Bland?
Well, another tour de force by the architect that we're used to seeing such rational schemes and beautiful and eloquent schemes. And I think this is resonant of that. He stripped away some of the 70s, I guess it is, 80s maybe, glass additions, which, I'm sure at that time looked fine and looked really cool and looked very modern, and to our eye today looked discordant. On the other hand, I just must say that I've always admired penthouses, and thank goodness there are more than 12 of them now in our city. When they sort of disregard to some degree what's below them, and the magic and mystery of living in the clouds is somehow this different world up there. And so I don't look for complete concordancy between a penthouse and what's below it. So therefore, in the specifics, I'm fine with all of it actually as is. I don't think I need to repeat it all. I've looked at those three big glass western windows, wondering if the pilaster should be slightly thicker. And if the, as Michael Goldblum has suggested, the double pilasters come down, I'm not sure that's really necessary because of its limited visibility or appreciability, let's say, by the public. But if there's other support for that, I suppose I could go along with it, but I wouldn't condition my approval on that. Otherwise, a wonderful job, I think.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I think this is, there's a vast improvement here. And overall, I think the design is well done. And I completely accept this idea of the penthouse being separated from the rest of the building. That said, so let me say also that I am extremely happy. I think I'm echoing what other commissioners have said, to see the greenhouses go. And as they disappear, these unattractive greenhouses that, you know, punctuate the landscape of the city, you know, it'll be better and better. I also do not have a problem with the expansive glass on the western side of the penthouse, because as Fred said, the visibility is limited and there's something sort of beautiful and streamlined about it. And I definitely feel a nice separation. I happen to agree with Michael Goldblum about the windows on the south side, the multi-pane windows. They seem sort of to not make sense to me, and I would recommend that the applicant take another look at that, you know, working with staff so that the end result is more coherent and cohesive with the rest of their very attractive plan. I also want to say that I think the fence design is very, very attractive and very understated in a way that, again, adds to the project, and I'm fine with the pergola.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
Yeah, I'm fine with the pergola. I'm happy for the removals of the greenhouse. And I think this is a well-designed, simple, elegant solution. My only issue with it, it has to do with, it seems to me there's a symmetry with the water tower, especially with the chimneys. I don't mind the three windows. I think they're fine. But there's something about the existing and the fabric in between. To get the three windows, you have to remove fabric from the existing. And that piece of fabric there, if it was on the other side, would keep that symmetry. I'm not opposed to what's done. I'm just saying there's an alternate proposition that can be done here, because to get the proposed, you have to remove fabric from the existing to get the thin piers. And if you kept that pier the same size it is, and I assume on the other side where the greenhouse is, they're the same pier, I assume, I don't know. So if then the proposition would be symmetrical, but either case it's fine with me.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I think I agree with Commissioner Goldblum. I have nothing to add.
Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith?
I think it's a very good application. The removal of the greenhouses will be a very big improvement here. The only comment I have is about the pilasters, and I agree that they should be more substantial, that when you do see it, even though it might be from a distance, it is sort of disconcerting to see this heavy water tower sitting on these spindly legs. So I would vote for widening the piers between the windows.
Okay. Okay, all right. And I'm just sort of taking a quick look at those east windows. All right, I think the way it comes down is that we are supportive with two modifications. One, that the applicant work in consultation with the staff to restudy the proportions of the three masonry openings to have more depth in the piers, more width in the piers. And two, that they also work with the staff to restudy the east fenestration at the 15th floor, to have develop a configuration that relates better to the large expanses of glass found elsewhere at the penthouse. So why don't I go ahead and I'll make that motion, and then we'll take it from there and do the vote and see where we are. So in the matter of docket number 22-02908, 1133 Fifth Avenue in the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District, a neo-federal style apartment building designed by Emery Roth and built in 1927 to 28. This is an application to modify an existing rooftop addition, install pergolas, replace railings, modify masonry openings, and replace windows. And I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District. That the proposed work, I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed work will include the demolition of the modern greenhouse structures, will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the modest enlargement of the rooftop addition will match the existing in terms of profile, material, and finish, and will not overwhelm the building or draw undue attention to the addition, that the enlargement of the rooftop addition and the installation of pergolas will only be visible from public thoroughfares at a distance over secondary facades in the context of the stepped massing of taller rooftop accretions, that the creation and modification of window openings at the rooftop addition will not detract from a uniform fenestration pattern, that the proposed pergolas will be simply designed and will have a neutral finish, helping them to remain a discrete presence on the roof, that the placement, material, size, and finish of the proposed railings will help to recall the historic railings at the roof, that the single light metal casement windows and tripartite metal window assemblies proposed at the secondary facades of the top floor of the main building will be in keeping with the variety of window types found on the 20th century buildings in the historic district, that the proposed windows at the main building will match the existing windows at secondary facades in terms of operation, configuration, material, and finish, helping to support a unified fenestration pattern at these visible facades, and that the work will not diminish the special character of the building or the historic district. However, we recommend that the piers between that the applicant work in consultation with the staff to restudy the proportions of the west facing windows so that the piers can be enlarged, and that they also work in consultation with the staff to restudy the fenestration on the east addition of the penthouse to develop a fenestration that relates better to the other windows in the penthouse and in this triplex. All right, so with that, Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Sorry. Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Abstain, since I just joined back in. My apologies.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and 1 abstaining, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved on the condition that you continue to work with the staff to revise the fenestration, configuration, and proportions on the west and east facades.
Thank you very much, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you very much.
All right, so that concludes our day. Thank you all for your great participation and thoughtful comments today. And we will not be meeting next week, so we'll meet the following week in November.